We are just 6 days away from the New Hampshire primary, but we still don't have the full Iowa caucus results, as we've been saying. Joe Biden, who is currently fourth in Iowa, told New Hampshire voters today that the caucuses were a punch in the gut.
Allison, when a struggling Bill Clinton came back and finished second in the New Hampshire primary in 1992, he declared himself the comeback kid, went on to win the Democratic nomination. Well, now that Joe Biden and his campaign have had time to digest those disappointing numbers from Iowa, they're trying to build a similar narrative. Let's take a listen to how the former vice president cast those Iowa results this morning.
I'm here to say that every single solitary vote is going to matter in this primary. You know, we're 24 hours later, they're still trying to figure out what happened in Iowa. At this rate, New Hampshire will be the first in the country to get the vote. I am not going to sugarcoat it. We took a gut punch in Iowa. The whole process took a gut punch. But look, this isn't the first time in my life I've been knocked down.
But that's not all, Allison. Joe Biden went on to talk about the State of the Union address last night, said Democrats need to get real about beating Trump. Watching that State of the Union address, he said two things were clear. One, that Democrats have to beat him, and two, that doing so is not going to be easy. And so he went on to launch some of the toughest attacks on his rivals so far, namely Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg. Let's take a listen to those.
But if Senator Sanders is a nominee for the party, every Democrat in America up and down the ballot, in blue states, red states, purple states, it's easy, and easy districts and competitive ones, every Democrat will have to carry the label Senator Sanders has chosen for himself. He calls him, and I don't criticize him, he calls himself a democratic socialist. Is he really saying that Obama-Biden administration was a failure? Pete, just say it out loud. I have great respect for Mayor Pete and his service to this nation. But I do believe it's a risk, to be just straight up with you, for this party to nominate someone who's never held an office higher than mayor of a town of 100,000 people in Indiana. I do believe it's a risk.
So what is this all about? Well, the Biden campaign insists that even with that disappointing showing in Iowa, he still has a very real chance to win the nomination. They say he's going to do well in Nevada. They say he has that firewall in South Carolina, and that as the electorate grows more diverse, his support among African-American voters will translate into a lot of delegates come Super Tuesday and beyond. But they also know that they really don't even get that far if he has another disappointing showing here in New Hampshire. So what they realize is that they have to have at least a second place showing, if not an outright win. And one of the reasons he's going so hard against Bernie Sanders in particular is reflected in the new voter registration information we got out of New Hampshire. Compared to the 2016 primary, there are actually more undeclared voters. What does that mean? Undeclared voters are those who don't register as either Democrat or Republican, but they can choose which primary they want to vote in. And since there really isn't much of a challenge to Donald Trump this time around, they're more likely to vote in the Democratic primary. And so making clear that contrast with Bernie Sanders on Medicare for All, arguing that he's too far to the left, is going to have real appeal potentially with those middle-of-the-road voters. And that's why he also needs to make that contrast clear with Pete Buttigieg as well. So now let's look ahead to Biden's schedule here this week. He has a televised town hall meeting tonight. He has that debate on Friday, which means he's going to be spending time off the trail until then. And then it's going to be really a final sprint here ahead of the New Hampshire primary next Tuesday to try to finish strong. The last thing, though, we still have to talk about fundraising. Mayor Bloomberg is still out there in the wings, announcing, in fact, that he's going to spend even more money. Unite the Country, which is that pro-Biden super PAC, announced they're adding $900,000 in TV spending here. The Biden campaign, actually one of the lowest spenders of all the candidates. That's something they also know they need to fix. And they say if they can get the money to do so, they'll be doing that as well.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.